Pelé stood still while the greatest team in football moved around him. Brazil led Italy 3-1 in the final, but its last image did not exist. Jairzinho carried the ball inward. Carlos Alberto began a run. Pelé received the pass, looked at the space, and waited. Then he rolled the ball into an empty patch of grass. The captain arrived like thunder. His shot flew toward the far corner, and football saw its future. But this perfect ending began 4 years earlier, with Pelé broken on the ground. Before England in 1966, Pelé seemed protected by his own legend. He had become a world champion at 17 in 1958, then collected another winner's medal in 1962, even though injury ended his tournament early. Brazil arrived seeking a third consecutive crown. Instead, defenders discovered that the fastest way to stop beauty was to attack the body creating it. Against Bulgaria, repeated challenges damaged Pelé's knee. He missed Brazil's defeat to Hungary, then returned still hurt for a decisive match against Portugal. Another tackle left him limping, and substitutions were not permitted. He stayed on the field as Portugal won 3-1 and eliminated the champions in the group stage. The wound was deeper than pain. Pelé later called 1966 the toughest experience of his life. The world celebrated his brilliance, yet the game seemed unwilling to protect it. He left England determined never to play for Brazil again. For 2 years, the yellow shirt continued without its king, and Pelé tried to convince himself that he no longer needed it. Pelé did not rebuild himself through speeches about revenge. He rebuilt at Santos until confidence returned. In July 1968, he played for Brazil again. England's scars remained, but so did his power. During qualification for Mexico, Brazil won all 6 matches, and Pelé scored 6 goals. Yet the team reached 1970 surrounded by uncertainty. João Saldanha had designed much of the side and delivered that perfect qualifying campaign. Then, less than 3 months before the World Cup, he was dismissed amid political interference, personal conflict, and footballing disagreement. Mario Zagallo inherited extraordinary talent with little time. For Pelé, Mexico would be his 4th and final World Cup. He had won twice, but injury had shadowed 2 tournaments. Now he carried expectation instead of youth. At 29, he knew this was his last chance to shape how the world remembered him on its largest stage. The question was no longer whether the king could still create magic. It was whether all Brazil's magicians could survive one another. Behind Brazil's yellow shirts stood a country divided by fear. In 1970, a military dictatorship ruled under President Emilio Garrastazu Medici. The period later called the Years of Lead brought censorship, imprisonment, torture, and exile. Official propaganda promised progress. The regime understood what football could do. Victory could unite millions for an afternoon. Then the government attached its image to the team's success. But appropriation was not authorship. The generals did not teach Gerson to see a pass or Jairzinho to break a defensive line. Pelé measured empty space alone. That distinction mattered. The players represented Brazilians whose love of football existed before the regime and would outlive it. Their joy could be used in slogans, yet it could not be reduced to them. Pelé later remembered enormous pressure and a political situation that was not good. In Mexico, the team could not control who would claim its victories. It could control the way those victories were made and offer the country something power could imitate but never manufacture. Brazil's squad looked less like a system than an argument. Pelé, Gerson, Jairzinho, Rivellino, and Tostão were club number 10s. Convention allowed one master. Zagallo decided that genius could share the same field if every genius agreed to move. Tostão drifted away from defenders and opened corridors. Jairzinho attacked from the right at speed. Rivellino brought invention and a cannon left foot. Gerson controlled tempo from deeper ground. Clodoaldo protected the center, while Captain Carlos Alberto turned defense into another wave of attack. Pelé became the connection. At 17, he had announced himself with explosive dribbles and goals. In Mexico, his greater weapon was understanding. He dropped between lines, drew defenders, won headers, delayed passes, and made teammates arrive in spaces opponents had not recognized. He was still the king, but not a monarch surrounded by servants. His authority came from making every threat more dangerous. Brazil did not arrive with 1 star and 10 witnesses. It arrived as a constellation, and if the pieces held together, no defense could know where the blow would come from. Brazil's opening match offered an immediate warning. Czechoslovakia scored first, but panic never took control. Rivellino equalized, Pelé put Brazil ahead, and Jairzinho struck twice in a 4-1 victory. Pelé also tried to score from inside his own half. The ball drifted narrowly wide, but the attempt told every opponent that his imagination had survived 1966. Then came England, the defending champions, in Guadalajara's punishing heat. Jairzinho crossed from the right, and Pelé drove a downward header towards the corner. He shouted for a goal before Gordon Banks reached the impossible. The goalkeeper twisted, touched the bouncing ball, and lifted it over the bar. One masterpiece had been stopped by another. Pelé answered without forcing the moment. Later, Tostão escaped pressure and found him near the penalty area. 3 defenders leaned toward Brazil's number 10. He released Jairzinho instead, and the winger smashed the only goal past Banks. A 3-2 victory over Romania completed a perfect group stage. Pelé scored twice. Beauty had survived resistance, heat, and expectation. From now on, however, one bad afternoon could erase everything. In the quarterfinal, Brazil met Peru and refused caution. The teams traded attacks beneath the Guadalajara sun, but Brazil had too many answers. Tostão scored twice, Rivellino and Jairzinho added the others, and a 4-2 victory carried Brazil into a semi-final haunted by defeat. Uruguay had broken Brazil at the Maracanã in 1950, when Pelé was a boy listening as his father wept by the radio. This was not personal revenge, but history thickened the air. Uruguay scored first. Clodoaldo answered before halftime, then Jairzinho and Rivellino completed a 3-1 reversal. Pelé's most unforgettable act did not become a goal. Racing toward Ladislau Mazurkiewicz, he let Tostão's pass roll to one side and sprinted around the goalkeeper's other. Pelé shot across the open net, missing by inches. The stadium gasped at an idea nobody saw until it was almost complete. Italy waited at the Azteca. Both nations owned 2 titles. The winner would become the first 3-time champion and keep the Jules Rimet trophy. Pelé was one match from the ending England had nearly stolen. On June 21st, 107,412 people filled the Azteca, while others watched the first World Cup broadcast globally in color, though many televisions showed gray. Italy had survived an exhausting 4-3 semifinal against West Germany. Brazil arrived unbeaten. Nothing guaranteed the next 90 minutes. In the 18th minute, Rivellino lifted the ball towards the far post. Tarcisio Burgnick watched Pelé rise, hang for a fraction, and drive a header into the net. 4 years after defenders tried to keep him down, the king opened his last World Cup final in the air. Italy refused the coronation. Roberto Boninsegna punished a defensive mistake and equalized before halftime. At 1-1, fear returned. Then Brazil's movement stretched tired legs. Gerson stepped past a challenge and drove a shot into the corner for 2-1. 5 minutes later, Gerson launched a diagonal pass. Pele cushioned a header into Jairzinho's path. The winger forced the ball over the line, becoming the first player to score in every match of a victorious World Cup campaign. Brazil led 3-1. The trophy was close, but the goal that would define this team had not happened. With 4 minutes remaining, Brazil began deep inside its half. Tostão dropped back. Brito and Piazza moved the ball forward. Clodoaldo escaped 4 Italians in seconds and released Rivellino down the left. Behind the ball, Brazil stayed balanced. Ahead of it, the field opened one decision at a time for them. The attack grew because every player understood the next space. Rivellino found Jairzinho, who carried the ball inward. Pele waited near the penalty area. Around him, bodies rushed, defenders retreated, yellow shirts changed lanes. He did almost nothing, and that was the genius. By standing still, he let the field reveal itself. Carlos Alberto charged from the right, outside the television frame. Pelé saw him, then rolled a pass into empty grass. The captain arrived at full speed and struck first time. The shot tore across Enrico Albertosi into the far corner. 8 Brazilian outfield players touched the move. No single man could own it. Pelé's final act was not a dribble or shot, but a pause and a pass that completed everyone else's work. The king achieved immortality by surrendering the last touch. Brazil won 4-1. Pelé was lifted above the crowd, stripped of almost everything, while Carlos Alberto raised the Jules Rimet trophy. Brazil became football's first 3-time world champion. Pelé remains the only player to win 3 men's World Cups. The dictatorship used the triumph in propaganda. It could claim photographs, but not the football inside them. No government created Clodoaldo's escape, Jairzinho's run, Pelé's stillness, or Carlos Alberto's thunder. Those belonged to the players and every Brazilian who loved the team freely. Mexico was Pelé's final World Cup, though he represented Brazil until 1971. FIFA credits him with 4 goals and 6 assists. Numbers explain only part of what remained. In 1958, Pelé became a wonder. In 1966, he became vulnerable. In 1970, he became timeless. Not because he stood above the team, but because he knew how to complete it. Empires burn. Stories remain.